they're coming, but I'm going to go ahead and get us started because we have some incredible presenters tonight. And I want to give us all the time that we can with them and to learn from them and see how we can engage with Remarkably Resilient moving forward. And we won't do that if I keep talking. So I'm going to keep it quick. Welcome to NAMI Johnson County's First Tuesday series. As you know, or may know, this happens on the first Tuesday of every month. And we really just try to bring this forward as a resource to increase education and awareness. But we also like to highlight stories and let people know that they're not alone. And this is one of the ways in which we can do that. So really looking forward to tonight. I will just real quickly introduce our presenters, but I would love for them to introduce themselves when they kick off their session. But we're really lucky tonight. We've got Kathleen here with, she's a CEO with TeamTech. And then we also have Tim DeWeese, who is the director of Johnson County Mental Health Center. These two individuals, I'm not just saying it because we're recording, but I will say these two individuals are absolutely amazing resources, amazing advocates in the community. And so we're really looking forward to learning from them tonight. Before we get into this session, I'm going to have our also incredible NAMI Johnson County Executive Director, Kelly, just share with us some updates, and then we'll get going for the evening.
All right, welcome everyone. Just wanted to walk through a few announcements if you're new to NAMI Johnson County. Our job in the county, as far as we are a mental health nonprofit, that educates, advocates, and supports people with mental illness and also their loved ones. So we do have support groups, both virtually and in person, and that's for the person who is living with a mental illness as well as the family member supporting them. We do educational programs such as Family to Family and Basics class, which is for people who have a child with a mental health issue or a loved one with a mental health issue. We also work on advocacy. So we have our resource line here to help and point you in the right direction if you're needing help finding resources. And we do lots of events and presentations where we can get out in the community and share our stories of hope and the fact that you are not alone. And last but not least, there are so many ways to give back to the community through our volunteer opportunities. We have lots of speaking engagements that we love to hear stories of people in recovery. And so it gives a great bit of hope and education to our community that might not be in recovery. And so we want to do that. We also have opportunities to teach or serve at events anywhere. It's just a great community to connect to. Now, our next First Tuesday webinar is going to be navigating a mental health crisis. Now, at all of our tabling events where we meet the people in the community, this manual, Navigating a Mental Health Crisis, is like the most, it is the fastest thing to jump off our table. People love this manual. It is fantastic because it is rich in resources on what happens in a crisis. For like many of us don't expect to go through a mental health crisis, but once we're pushed into that world, we really don't know who to call or what to do. But this discussion that we're going to have next first Tuesday in April, it's April 2nd, is going to be on how do we spot the signs and symptoms? Who do we call? How do we deal with the police? What if our loved one's arrested? What if our loved one runs away? How do we handle those crises and get ahead of it also and develop a crisis plan? So that is going to be our next webinar on April 2nd. We welcome you to find our calendar app on our website and register for that. We also have a weekly e-newsletter that we send out registration and all of our updates. So please make sure to join that, which is going to be on our website as well. And then, of course, our social media. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it back to Catherine.
Wonderful. Thank you. So at any point, if you have questions, again, as we get ready to kick off our incredible presentation, please feel free to use the chat. As we're going through, you'll see I've already started putting links in the chat related to what we're talking about. I'm going to do so as well as we're going through the presentation. So keep your chat open, and if you have any questions, let us know. But Kathleen and Tim, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to share your screen, and we can get going for the night.
Great. Thank you so much, Catherine and Kelly. I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Kathleen Harnish McKune. I'm half of the team tonight. And we're here to talk about Remarkably Resilient Together. I'll share a little bit of my story as I get to the slides with my sister. But I think, Tim, I'm going to go ahead to the next slide and let you introduce yourself.
Great. Thanks, Kathleen. My name's Tim DeWeese, and I'm the director of Johnson County Mental Health Center. I've been the director, and I see a lot of familiar faces and names on the group today. So in fact, I see one that was with me last night, but we were talking basketball. So instead of talking basketball, we'll talk about being resilient and building a resilient community. I've been with Johnson County Mental Health Center pretty much, I would say pretty much my entire adult life. I had started here in 1995 and have in essence grown up within Johnson County Mental Health Center. And now I have the fortunate opportunity to be the director of this great agency and be able to lead a group of amazing people that care about other human beings and want to make the community better. So I feel very fortunate to be in that position. I have worked with Kathleen ever since I became the director. I was looking for someone to help me write a strategic plan and initiate some big changes within our organization and to really move a lot of ideas into action. And Kathleen was the person that I'd worked with a little bit before, but she has helped me immensely over the last 10 years. And we've become partners on many projects and many things. And Remarkably Resilient Together, or RRT, is something that I feel really strongly about, and that every chance I have to be able to talk about building a resilient community, I take that opportunity. So that's who I am and why I'm here. And Kathleen, do you want me to go right into why I think this is important?
I think that'd be great, Tim. And then I'll pick up with introducing a little bit more about my sisters and our story.
All right, perfect. So number one, I think that, beyond the mental health challenges that we face in our communities, there are a whole host of things right now, and quite frankly, prior to the pandemic, I would meet with family groups and we meet with folks, and I would share my concern that I thought things were moving in a bad way. And what I meant by that was I often said that I thought civility should be placed on the endangered species list because it was becoming pretty much absent from society. In that we couldn't agree to disagree. There's a lot of hate in our world. And I truly believe that each of us can change our community. Each of us can change this sphere of influence around us by doing two simple things. And the first is simply being kind to one another. Kindness requires a higher state of mental capacity, meaning that we have to be intentional. And you'll hear us talk about intentionality tonight and being thoughtful. But I think it demands, our communities demand that we choose, that each of us choose to be kind. So that's the first thing. Just be kind human beings. And the second thing I think we can do is learn how to effectively regulate our emotions. I think that in a world where we encounter so many things that we can't control, there is one thing we can control, and that is ourselves. It is how we respond to situations. It's how we choose to respond to situations. And I believe that there's a true difference between reacting and responding. When you react to a situation, that's coming from an emotional base. And I know Kathleen will talk about that here in a little bit when we start to talk about flight, fight, and freeze, our natural responses. But when we take a moment and ground ourselves and take control of our emotional self and begin to think from a higher level within our brain, we can choose to respond appropriately and effectively in situations. And I see far too often, whether it's with gun violence, whether it's hate, whether it's just simply arguments, many of those situations could be avoided and could simply not exist if, one, we chose to be kind, and two, we, each of us, made a commitment to learn to more effectively manage and regulate our emotions. And that is really what tonight's all about. It's about making a choice to learn, to find tools that will help us regulate our emotions so that when we are placed in those situations, we can be intentional about how we choose to respond. And my belief is that, and quite frankly, Kathleen told me that she wanted to change the world when she first talked to me about this. And I truly believe that if we could begin to have people do these two things, become remarkably resilient and learn to effectively manage their emotions, that we can actually change our communities, we can change the state that we live in, and we can change our world. And by doing that, we actually become more resilient, and we also then model for young people. And I think that is a key for our communities to grow in a positive way. So that is the reason that this is so important to me. It's the reason that I've put the energy and effort into to having us share this both within our agency, but across our community. And it's the reason that I've chosen to continue to work with Kathleen and share these resources.
Thank you so much, Tim. I feel like I could go home now.
No.
No. I'm Kathleen Harnish McKune, and as Tim said, he and I've worked together now for, gosh, about 10 years. But I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of a firm called TeamTech. We've been in business doing strategic facilitation now for over 30 years. And so you think, well, what is the strategic facilitator coming in to talk about this? Well, that's really where our story comes in. And all just in a nutshell, in April of 2017, I'll never forget the day and the feeling. I was facilitating the bringing together of the trauma-informed community movement in St. Louis with the trauma-informed community movement in Kansas City, Trauma Matters KC. And in that particular day, in that particular meeting, the folks from St. Louis were presenting their Trauma 101 training. And so as a facilitator, I'm normally in the front of the room. I step to the back of the room to listen to the presentation and figure out kind of what's the reflection after. And in the presentation, about 10 minutes in, they put up the ACEs score, and I'd never heard of it, Adverse Childhood Experiences rating score, and the 10 questions. And all kinds of light bulbs started going off. And I realized then that my twin sisters, Sharon and Karen, there they are, that we could now start to understand why we had so many chronic health conditions, and also how we'd been able to break our cycle of multi-generational incest abuse in our family, in our paternal family. We had grown up with that. And I had all these aha moments listening. And suddenly on the way home, I called my sisters and I said, we have to learn about the neuroscience of trauma. It's so important. It can help us in our journey and our understanding and our recovery. So with that, we wrote a book, Remarkably Resilient Community Matters. And in that, by studying, I took 2 years and just studied everything I could about the neuroscience of trauma. And in dialogue with my sisters and our lived experience, we really called out 4 R's of resilience, which were super important to us. And in particular, 2 of them rock solid, confirmed by neuroscience. So the first was how important relationships are. And particularly in the life of a child, you just need one strong, safe, loving relationship. And we had those in our small community with community members. Also, our response, our coping mechanisms, our recovery journeys, which have been and are a roller coaster, but steady, but a roller coaster. And then regulation, something we had never heard about, and something that I wish we would have learned about years and years ago. And so it was really that then. In our book, we have these calls to action for the community to think about these 4 R's and bring them into action. And we waited for about 5 years for that to happen, and it didn't. And not to the level we wanted it to. And so I turned to my sisters and I said, we're supposed to do it. So that's where we decided to create Remarkably Resilient Together, as Tim said, creating resilience in our community and starting with that very firm foundation of the R of regulation. And then sprinkling into that and understanding the importance of self-care. So that's how I kind of came to this through lived experience. I'll also share that I have a son with severe and persistent mental illness. He's 23 now. And so I also have some lived experience in helping him with his journey.
Kathleen, can I just add one more thing?
Yes.
Because every time I hear you speak, it reminds me of something else. And I did mention this, but that first R of your 4 R's is relationships. And I mentioned earlier that prior to the pandemic, I really focused on this idea of relationships and the fact that what we saw going into the pandemic was this it was another epidemic, another pandemic of loneliness and isolation. And when the pandemic hit, the first thing that we heard from people was that we needed to socially distance ourselves from one another. And I remember hearing that and thinking to myself, no, we need to distance ourselves from one another, but we need to make sure that we stay socially connected, because despite being in the most technologically advanced society in the world, with all of this technology that's supposed to keep us connected, when we ask people about how connected they feel, what we hear and what we see in the research is that people feel more lonely and isolated than they ever have. And I think that has to do with a number of things. I mentioned the lack of civility, but the bottom line is we've lost the ability to develop and maintain healthy human relationships. We rely upon our phones, we rely upon technology, and there's good purpose for technology. We're using an amazing source of technology today to stay connected. But despite all of that technology, we still are not connected. And many young people these days view their relationships through technology and through devices. And I think that what we have to do is really focus on that first R of developing authentic human relationships. If we're not developing those authentic human relationships, then I think it makes it even more difficult to develop the other 3 R's: response, recovery, and regulation. And so I just wanted to make that point that it's when I talk about being kind and regulating your emotions, it's all around developing authentic human relationships. Right there are two of the 4 R's. And so when you say that, Kathleen, I just wanted to kind of throw that out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tim. Absolutely. And that really begins then to say, okay, well, tell us a little bit more about Remarkably Resilient Together. So how we come at this, everyone experiences trauma sometime in their lives in periods of high stress. And that counterbalance is resilience helps us weather those ups and downs. And the mantra that Tim and I and my sisters really bring to this is we are more resilient. We just are when we are regulated and we have a full resilience cup. So emotional regulation and then that self-care that helps us fill our cup. That's really what's behind the tools that we want to give you tonight. As Tim talked about, this is a partnership between TeamTech and the Johnson County Mental Health Center. Catherine was one of the many handful, about 24 maybe, readers throughout the process. Really appreciated the insight of folks at the Mental Health Center to make these materials as relevant and full of those important insights that we know from best practices. And so here we're teaching that important skill of regulation. We have a journal, and then there are 2 decks of cards. And we're going to share a little bit about what's in the journal, some materials. And then the 1 deck of cards in the moment are 52 ideas for emotional regulation techniques. And the over time, or the card that's in the blue deck, we have 52 ideas for self-care. And one of the most rewarding things I'm doing right now is I'm a volunteer at the therapeutic community in Johnson County Corrections. It's where individuals that are justice involved with substance use issues go for 6 months of treatment. And one of the women said the other night, after I'd been out there and they were working with the cards, she said, you know, I went through those overtime cards, the self-care, and there are so many ideas that I can do for free. And I always thought self-care costs money. And she goes, I have some that I can do. And it was one of our hopes, is that we could reach everyone. And when she said that, it just kind of warmed my heart, and be able to make this accessible for everyone. And the cards are in the 4 C's. And so we always also say, even if you don't remember what's on a card, we hope that in 10 years, you know that you need to think about care and calm, encourage, and connect when you're looking for ways to emotionally regulate or looking for some things for self-care. So you'll see that there are 13 care cards in every deck, 13 calm, 13 courage, and 13 connect. And to Tim's point earlier, really driving home what we think will be probably the next R that we roll out, that idea of connect and the importance of connection and relationships for individuals. So we did make sure we're aligned with the neuroscience of trauma. We use evidence-based practicing of journaling and self-reflection. And then this is very much grounded in the lived experience of my sisters and myself. So a little bit about the journal. We're going to fly through some of this fairly quickly, because some of this you may be very familiar with. But one of the things we do like to share with folks is, just because it's such a seminal piece of research, was the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey that was done in 1998. It really started the connection between experiencing adversity and having poor health issues, both mental and physical health. And so that tie began this whole conversation that maybe we need to pay attention to, particularly in this study, childhood adversity. And then we began to expand those ACEs, and this is called the pair of ACEs, and think about, you know, it also matters the community that you're in. And the more of those items that are around the tree there, either in the soil or up above, that you're exposed to, the higher the probability that it will lead to poorer health outcomes, mental health outcomes as well, and some things like substance use and lower life potential. So it was just a seminal piece of research. We love this definition of trauma from SAMHSA. My sisters and I can relate to this so much. And I think when you all think about it, individual trauma is so unique to each person. Sharon and Karen and I might have had the same event or the series of events, but the way we experienced them, so something that was emotionally harmful, life-threatening, and its effects being the functioning of your mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, just your well-being like that, was different for each one of us girls. And so trauma is such a unique experience and unique effects, even though we might have the same event. We really like that definition. So we want to share with you those 3 E's. And then also and Tim, you can even talk to this. I have held focus groups over my 30 years of work with law enforcement, mental health folks, individuals that are incarcerated, individuals that work with those that are incarcerated, just so many walks. And I have to say, in the last 5 to 6 years, this realization that the root cause nature of trauma is underneath so many of those things that really plague us. And so beginning to understand that it's not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. And what I say when we work with other adult survivors, my sisters and I, we didn't choose what happened. We wouldn't choose it, but it happened. And now it is up to us to manage our way through what happened to us. But it lifted that guilt and shame of what's wrong with you. And we want people to understand that and I tell my son that too. He doesn't choose his mental illness. He hasn't chosen the brain kind of kerfluffleness, we call it, that he sometimes goes through, but it's what he was given and it's what happened. And now he's learning to manage it. So I think that's our main message to other adult survivors. To help learn how to do that. And emotional regulation and self-care are two of the most important tools that my sisters and I have learned.
I think from the standpoint from the Community Mental Health Center is one of the things that you'll hear from us is that we don't talk a lot about pathology. We don't approach it from again, what's wrong with you or what diagnosis you have. Rather, we focus on the strengths and the resilience you possess within yourself, and that is going to be the focus. So we want to find out what's happened to you within your life, what is your lived experience all about, and we're going to build a plan from that, as opposed to traditionally in the field of psychiatry and psychology, it was more about pathology and the fact that we would need to fix something that was broken. The fact is there's nothing broken with people. They just have a different life experience. And what we want to do is build upon the strengths of each individual and develop that resilience. And I think that is that's really the basic root of strengths-based philosophy with what we treat and how we treat people at the mental health center. But it really is also at the basis of being remarkably resilient. You have to come from a strengths approach, and you really can't focus on the pathology or how someone's broken.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
This is what Tim mentioned earlier, the just natural human stress response. And we want to share this with you because it helps understand why it's so important to emotionally regulate, because it actually has an impact on your body, on the cortisol and adrenaline that is dumped in and therefore can cause longer term chronic health conditions. So we kind of tell the story, if we're in a room together and a threat comes, let's say a bear walks in the room, you are naturally going to go into the human stress response. You're going to go into survival mode. Some of us are going to fight. We may confront the threat, right? Look around for something that we can use as a weapon. Some are going to flight. You're going to run or escape, avoid the threat. There are going to be some individuals that freeze. They're literally paralyzed, and you find you're not able to move. You might not even be able to speak or scream or anything. And then maybe less so appease in the bear situation, but others that try to befriend or pacify so that the threat doesn't come after you. That is natural, it is human, and we need it. The challenge becomes when you go into this human stress response when there's not a threat around, or when you get stuck in it because you have been so used to needing to be in fight, flight, freeze, or appease mode. That's when it starts to become unhealthy for your body. And so we like to, in the journal, we talk about emotional regulation, learning to manage those emotions. So when you go into fight, flight, freeze, or appease, when there isn't the need to, there isn't that danger or that threat, you catch yourself and you use a regulating technique to get your emotions managed again. Now, why is that important? Because when you're in fight, flight, freeze, or appease, you are no longer in your thinking brain, in the front of your thinking capacity. You've moved into your survival and your emotional brain. And so we need that. But if we're in that and we don't need it, then it's hard for us to access thinking capacity, and we will often say or do things then that we might regret because they come out of that emotional or survival brain. And so we really want folks to realize when that's happening, catch yourself, do a regulating technique, and come back into emotional regulation. Sometimes you'll get fight, flight, freeze, or peace when you get triggered. So it's a reminder. So some folks are going to be able to go back into that meeting room where the bear came and they're good. Some people aren't going to be able to go in the room. Others are in the room and they hear a noise and they're triggered and it reminds them and they go into fight, flight, freeze, or appease. And then dysregulation, we mentioned, you kind of get stuck. You're on hyper, or we also call it hypo, but you get either over hyped up, waiting, or you withdraw and you're more kind of in yourself withdrawn and avoiding because you just know there's going to be a threat coming at you, or you're always in that kind of state of what we call dysregulation. And then some of you may be in helping professions. Tim's organization is one of those. My sister was an EMT and she also was an ER tech. This vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, compassion fatigue, we know are real. And if we didn't learn anything else from our health workers, it was just what compassion fatigue looked like during COVID, right? And the things that we all tried to do to try to help them combat that. And then we remind us that we all have stress, and stress can also cause us to kind of start to move into that stress response. Positive stress is that stress that's mild and it actually helps us learn, grow, and change. Tolerable is, it's difficult for us. It's maybe grief, maybe we've lost a loved one, but we have support systems that helps lessen it. Toxic stress is kind of an equivalent to trauma. It's that long activation of the stress response when you're caught in a really unrelenting stress and you don't really have that strong support system. So we're going to now, I think, move into, we've really talked about triggers, and that is the stress response when it's not needed. And if you think for a moment about yourself, Sharon and Karen and I talk about this. What are we like when we get like that? Some of you might be like Sharon and I, and we are in that stress response where we're fight or flight. So you can pretty much see when we're dysregulated. So quick to temper, quick to react, maybe over, right? We're over yelling. Everything's a crisis. It's, that proverbial last straw. Some of you may be more like our sister Karen, and Karen is the kind that goes hypo. She withdraws, goes quiet. You don't even almost know she's there. And sometimes it's harder to recognize somebody that's gone into that withdrawal when they get triggered. So some of us it's clearly pretty easy to see, and some of us it's a little bit harder to see. So you might think for a moment just what your tendency is when you get caught off in traffic, for example. And are you the person that's kind of worked up, or are you the person that's just saying, I've kind of had it and I'm, catching the bus from now. I'm done with this. I'm just going to catch the bus. So you have those different kinds of reactions when you get in that dysregulated kind of stress response. I don't know, Tim, what you'd want to add to that.
I think you covered everything.
Okay. All right. And then this is the picture. So again, thinking about where you are, because it will help you in your recognition. If you're more stuck on hyperarousal, so you tend to be on that blow up side, rage, anxiety, elation, hypervigilance, that was definitely me, hypervigilance all the time. Or if you're stuck on that low, more depressed, disconnected, exhausted, numbness. And think about that, because that will help you recognize what's going on in your body. So when you go hyper, right, your body is hyping up. So your heart rate's increasing, your breathing is faster, you might be getting sweaty because your body's ready to fight. For those that go hypo, like my sister Karen, hers slows down. Her breathing gets more shallow. She's ready to almost like go to sleep, right? It's that kind of shutting down of the body. And so you're just aware of how it feels, how you experience it in your breath, how you feel it in your skin, how you feel it in just the way your body's responding. And
Kathleen,
the
only thing that I was going to add, you can go ahead. The thing that I was going to add to that was that really, as we begin to talk about this a little bit further, the key and the whole purpose of the journal is that one of the things I had the fortunate opportunity to work with Kathleen and her partner Joel. And Joel's position that challenged me the most was that you really can't learn anything or move forward until you reflect upon yourself. And so I think one of the things when we start to talk about regulating your emotions is being open and being willing, whether that's through journaling or just self-reflection, taking that moment and looking at what you bring to the situation, what you bring to the table, so to speak. And so I think one of the things for me is that I'm really passionate about what I've spent my entire life doing, and that's working in the mental health field. And some of you may know this, but the first job that I had as a case manager, because I was the newbie on the block, they assigned me to work with at the time it's called AMI Group, the Alliance for the Mentally Ill. It was back before NAMI existed, and honestly, that's where I learned a lot about the way I approach our work today was through people with lived experience and their family members. And the key for me is that because of that passion that I have, when I have found myself being triggered or becoming dysregulated, I began to feel myself getting warm. I tend to sweat a little bit. And so it happens to me most of the time when I'm before elected officials talking with them about the need for mental health services or funding for mental health, and I get asked a question that I think is really off subject or offhand, and I can think to myself, did that question just really get asked? And what would happen is that I would get so passionate with my response that I was becoming dysregulated because the response was coming from emotion. And what was happening was that was being mistaken for anger and hostility. And so the message that I was giving wasn't even being heard. It may have been the best message in the world, but because I was dysregulated, because I was, in essence, a little bit losing control, and I'll admit that it felt like at times I was losing control, the message would not get heard. And so I had to find that when I reflected upon my own behavior and when I looked at why people were misunderstanding or why my behavior was getting in the way, it was only then that I could start to look at the tools. So today, I use one of those cards that we just showed. I pulled out a few that work very well for me, and I have one attached to my daily planner. And on it, it says take pause, take a breath, and think about how you want to respond. And so every time I start to feel that way, I look at that card and I do exactly what it says. The other thing is that when I present or when I'm in front of a group, I could also get dysregulated. And so one of the things that I learned from the cards is that I should use something to stay grounded. Tonight, I have a coin that I carry with me all the time. And whenever I'm speaking, I always have it out. I'm playing with it. I'll flip it in my hands, but it helps me stay grounded and focused on the task at hand. And so I think those are the tools that when we talk about Remarkably Resilient Together and these tools, the 52 that are in the moment and the 52 that are over time, those are really techniques that each one of us can employ to look at how we might be able to regulate our own emotions.
Thank you for that, Tim.
Yep.
And that sets up so nicely the process that the journal, and that we're going to have you, we're going to show you 8 of the cards. We'd love to show you 52 right now, but we said, well, 8 makes sense right now during a presentation. But a chance for you then to learn this process. This is the other piece that when we were visiting and thinking about the reflection is we'd love to just have a community that's always recognizing that trigger or dysregulation. So you know your signs. What does it feel like? What does it look like for you? Communicate if you're able. It's important. You're not always able because you can't get to that communication center because you've gone to that survival brain, that emotional brain. So you may even just need to step away or a hand up. Then you do a regulating activity. And what's so amazing about regulation is you learn it from your birth mom. And that is you first learn regulation through their heartbeat. So that rhythmic and repetitive nature, that's where you learn regulation. So we also, Dr. Bruce Perry made me a great despair. I'm a mom that adopted my son. And if you don't learn it in the womb, it can be harder to teach. And I remember when Dr. Bruce Perry shared that research, I just was like, oh my goodness. But that rhythmic and repetitive, that's why that spinning of the coin, a lot of times people touch their fingers, the rocking, you'll catch me sometimes rocking. So rhythmic and repetitive, and then you notice what's happening and when you try a regulating activity. So we're going to ask you to think about that, kind of recognize, communicate. We're going to have you pick a regulate, notice, you're just kind of feeling it. And so we're going to share 8 of those cards that come from the in the moment. So these are regulation techniques. And so we want to give you a moment and look at, we put 2 of the care ideas, 2 of the calm, 2 of courage. Sometimes it can be regulating if you're the one that's able to bring to the forefront something that helps bring the heat down in the room a little. And then connect. We know that connect, particularly with nature and with yourself, are really grounding techniques. So take a moment, see if you might have one of those speak to you. If you think about your recognizing your dysregulation, you kind of go hyper or hypo. Then being able to pause long enough to be able to do a regulating technique. And so maybe take a minute, if you pick one that you can do, just kind of do that. And notice what happens to your breathing, to your heart rate, to just kind of your body, to kind of your spirit. So we're going to let those of you that are comfortable doing so to share. You can share through the chat, but Tim and I also love to hear voices. So if it's okay and you're comfortable doing so, you can also come off mute if you'd like. And we just like you to share which card you picked. And maybe when you think about doing that, kind of what that might feel like. Notice what that might feel like when you do that regulating technique. And you're also welcome to share in the chat. So we're just going to give you a minute.
I chose the one, the calm card that says touch your thumb to each finger as you say to yourself, I can do this. And that one helped me just even in this moment, just get my mind off the flurry of thoughts that were going through my head and just kind of like be a little bit more mindful.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kelly. Yeah, very much.
I think Kelly used a term there that I also want to mention, and this will allow you all to think a little bit more about this if you want to share. She said mindful, and I think there's a difference between being mindful with your mind having full of all of these thoughts and things that are going around and around to being mindful. So mindful, MINDFULL versus mindful, MINDFUL. So it's a difference, and I have a picture in my mind what that looks like, being mindful versus mindful. So nice choice of words.
I think we're getting some things in the chat. Yeah. Catherine says, I have the cards on my desk and I use them in meetings. I did the first care card about visualizing something humorous, taking a breath and allowing laughter. Laughter is incredibly regulating. Yeah, and Brian shared courage, choosing not to gossip. Yes, that's courage. And there was such a, so in Dr. Bruce Perry, you can tell he's an amazing neuroscientist. He wrote an article for Fast Company, which is an entrepreneurial magazine. And I'm like, what's Dr. Bruce Perry doing with an article in Fast Company? But it was an article about just that, which is the power of kind words in the workplace. And when you do that, so taking that courage not to gossip, when you instead sprinkle in kind words, it creates an almost like safety net that people can fall into, that it just helps with giving that additional support around the workplace. And I thought it was such a great article to bring neuroscience into the whole world of work. Melanie asks, how do we get a copy of those cards? I think Catherine's going to drop into the chat, but we'll have a QR code too. You can go to Friends of Johnson County Mental Health Center and make a tax-deductible donation, and they will get you the cards. We're distributing only through nonprofit partners. Our firm has always worked with organizations that work on behalf of those most vulnerable in our communities. And so we wanted to use this as a way to give back to those organizations.
Also just mentioned that if for some reason not making a financial contribution is something that you're able to do, then you should let me or Kate know, and we will get you a set of cards. The only purpose for the donation is to cover the cost of the 2 decks of cards. So, but I don't want that to prohibit someone from getting a deck. So you can, we'll drop that in the chat. You'll also, at the end of the presentation, like Kathleen said, you'll have a QR code. But if not, if it's impossible for you to make a donation, which currently with the way things are in our country, everything costs a lot. So don't want this to prohibit people from getting a deck of cards. So we'll take care of that if that's needed. So Kate or I can help with that.
And we've had even corporations that have donated dollars to make sets available. So if you even knew of a corporation like that, let us know. Happy to go talk with them. And we were able to get some for clients just that way, so that they're no charge to clients and costs are covered. So that is regulation. I do want to, I want to tell one more story. And I want to go back to this. I learned about regulation. I learned, as you know, about ACEs when 2017, I was 56 years old. And my sisters and I had not shared our stories even with each other, only with a therapist here and there. And so when we started to learn about regulation, you don't even know you're running dysregulated. We didn't know because we'd run that way our entire lives. And I just thought that's who I was. I'm just always kind of hyped up. And if you really set me off, you're going to set me off, you know, and that's just who I am. And I got set off in personal situations, but not work, because work was our safe place. So people at work, for the most part, didn't even know. But home, you know, made relationships more challenging. So I decided that my son and I, who at the time then was 16, would learn regulation together. And you all, some of you might be able to relate to this, but this is how our relationship was before that. I never hurt my son. I never hit my son. We broke our cycle, but I yelled at him and I said some things that I regretted. So he came home, missed curfew, right? 16 years old, missed curfew. And we start up that explosion ladder and we go at each other, and I'm yelling at him and he's yelling at me, and there's an explosion and words are said, and it's not a fun situation. That was not unusual. Again, never hurt him, never hit him, but said some things that shouldn't have been said. So then we started learning regulation. And I talk about it. I shared with him the neuroscience. We each had some regulating techniques we picked from. We didn't have the cards then, but we read everything we could. And so after about a year of that kind of practice, he misses curfew, comes home. I start at him and we get about 2 steps up the explosion ladder and we stop. And I looked at him and I said, we are dysregulated. We need to separate. And I went to my rocking chair with my pup dog. I rock and pet my pup dog. And he went and put on his headphones, does this kind of music, but again, rhythmic and repetitive. And I waited for him to get for me to feel calmer, him to feel calmer. But what is you don't necessarily go from dysregulation to regulated like that. Sometimes you're so worked up, you need time and space. That is normal brain science. It isn't always immediate. And that was hard for me to understand because I'm like, he should be regulated by now. Well, it doesn't work that way. So I said to him, do you feel safe? He said, I do. I said, I do too. We'll come back to this tomorrow. And it's not an avoidance technique. So the next day at noon, we come together and I said, we need to talk about this curfew. And he said, Mom, just wait for a minute. Can I say something? And I said, sure, sweetie. He said, Mom, I just want to tell you, thank you for how well you handled dysregulation last night. That was my 17-year-old son. And I have to tell you, after practicing this regulation now for, since 2017, so about 7 years, I feel like a different human in my life because it's all down a notch. And I had no idea how much I was running hyped up given my background and my history and my lived experience. And I can feel just what it means to be a calmer individual and not need to go up that, what I call my explosion ladder, to be able to handle a situation. So I share that because it makes a difference. And my son is much more regulated and able to handle some of those anxious and anxiety situations that he faces because he has those regulating techniques. It's kind of magical. It's so simple. It's so magical. So we want to talk about self-care. So self-care is that practice of really doing those things that I like to say feed our soul, that bring you joy, and things that help you fill up your cup. Maybe take a moment. We've all had those times in our lives where we've just felt like our cup runneth dry. Maybe that's the way. And I learned this imagery from Tim. No one had ever talked to me about resilience cup and is your cup full or your cup empty? And I remember at a very poignant moment in my life when Tim said to me, Kathleen, you've let your resilience cup run dry. And I knew exactly what he meant. And I was feeling exactly how it felt. And I knew that he was right. And that was an aha moment for me. I had that aha moment about 3 years ago. And I think very much differently about doing and making time for activities that feed my soul and that bring me joy, because that's the way we fill that cup so that we then can take care of ourselves. We can take care of others. I never completely believed that imagery. And then when it happened to me, I said, oh my goodness, that's exactly the case. And I'm going to pay more attention to this whole thing of keeping a full resilience cup.
Sometimes people think that self-care is selfish, and it's the exact opposite of selfish. It allows you to be uniquely human and help others. And I think we can take care of ourselves. And if we take care of ourselves, then and only then are we able to take care of other people. And so it's self-care. The importance of it can't be understated. And, in my position as a director of the mental health center, it doesn't do me any good to talk about self-care if I'm not demonstrating that. If I'm not doing the things that bring me joy, like fishing or coaching basketball or listening to live music. Those are 3 things that bring joy into my life. And those are the things that fill my cup so that I can do what I do day in and day out. It's not selfish. It's actually the exact opposite. of being selfish.
So we want to give you an opportunity to think about your own self-care. And we have the same kind of rhythm of reflection, and that is recognize depletion. What does that look like and feel like in you? And then being able to communicate with trusted people how you're feeling and that you're feeling depleted. And I need to take some time for myself here. Then do self-care, schedule it in, make it a regular practice. And we're going to share with you 8 cards. We hope one of them speaks to you, but you may have a self-care practice that you already do. We just encourage you to keep doing it and being mindful of then noticing, what does it feel like to have a full cup? What does that allow you to do? And so here are 8 of the cards in the overtime deck. So of the 52, we picked out 8. Again, 2 that are in the care category, 2 in the calm, 2 in the courage, and 2 in the connect. And see if there is one of those that when you read through it, you think, okay, that would be something that could help fill my cup. It would be something that would take care of me. And then again, we'll give you an opportunity if you want to chat. Oh, I love that. Catherine put, I heard the other day someone say to find self-care that aligned with our love language to feed our mind and our soul. I thought that was awesome. No, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So take a moment, see if one of those cards kind of speaks to you, or maybe even highlights a self-care practice that you already use, and would love to hear from you if you're comfortable, or feel free to fill up the chat and we'll keep an eye out for it.
The one I really connected with was ask for help when you need it. And that's hard to do.
Yeah, that is hard to do. Yes, yes, Kelly, thank you for that. Yeah, that takes courage and can be so important for your self-care. Think in the chat, Brian, thank you, said in the calm cards, that walk outside. Yeah. Yeah. Nature has this incredible ability to be able to be part of that self-care practice. And then Melanie said, listening to calming music and singing. Oh, I love that. Yes. Catherine, yes. Notice the stories you're telling yourself. Yeah. And see if it's time to tell a more supportive story. Yes. Thank you for that, Catherine. And Matthew says, just like Kelly, landing right there, ask for help when needed. Having the courage to do that. And then someone from their iPad said self-care that aligns with our love language. Oh, question mark. So Catherine, do you want to say just a sentence or two about your comment about love language?
Sure. So pretty much what that was illustrating and describing is that when we're talking about self-care, or we're talking about coping, or just generally speaking, talking about our mental and physical well-being, that it's really important to find those strategies that bring us joy, that fill our cup, that leave us feeling more fulfilled. For example, for some, cooking a delicious meal may be something that connects with their love language, that they enjoy. And for some, it may feel daunting and may not fill their cup. They may see it as, I've got more dishes to do. So finding the things that really you connect to, whether that be your mind, your body, your soul, all of the above, and then doing those things to kind of help fill that. So that's a little bit about what that was referencing.
Great. Thank you, Catherine. So the same kind of process that we talked about before in this, again, I'm going to go back. Hold on, let me go back. Is just remembering that when you are thinking about, and you have an opportunity to be more mindful and aware of what's happening, recognize that depletion, communicate, do self-care, and notice. And in the journal that is part of this set, there's a section that is after, and we call it kind of a green divider in the moment, that lets you reflect on your journey of trying regulating techniques. We have a section behind a blue divider that lets you reflect on recognizing, communicating, doing self-care, and notice. And then there's a yellow section that gives you a chance just to step back, and maybe quarterly might be when you want to do it. Maybe you want to do it more often than that. I kind of think about these kind of quarterly rhythm and think about, where am I in that journey of being a more regulated human with a full resilience cup? And that gives me a chance just to do that step back and one more level of reflection on the work I'm trying to do to become more and more resilient through regulation and self-care. And then finally, I learned about being reflective from one of my, really my main mentor in my life, my business partner, Joel Wright. We were in business together, until he retired. It's probably about 25 years. And Joel, I'm an action queen. Joel was probably one of the most reflective humans I ever had a chance to meet and get to travel with, and get a chance to do work with and learn from and mentor. And he and his wife are like parents to my husband and I. And he taught us about the importance of reflective capacity. That is the ability to pause, you step back, and you think about the event, the experience, or the interaction. And it is in that reflection, that intentional pause, where we as humans kind of uniquely get a chance to learn, change, and grow. And so we have built throughout the journal this opportunity for individuals to step back and reflect. And what we're doing is building that reflective capacity in individuals so that, again, we are more resilient, we are able to learn, change, and grow. And so we just share that with you so that if you decide to do some of the journaling, that's why those reflections are in there so often, and you're encouraged to continue to do that. So that's building reflective capacity. We share with you just a couple of quotes here. I shared with you the one already about, I always thought the middle one, though, self-care was something that costs money. This one touched me because it was so close to how I felt when I learned about this. One of the women said to me the other night, I just want to thank you for giving a name, dysregulation, to feelings that I've had all my life, and then for giving me ways to manage those feelings. I could just relate to that one so much. And then one of the moms said, I'm kind of gonna learn this with my kids like you did, and I'm gonna take this home to my 3 kids, and we're gonna learn regulation together. And that's the kind of change that we hope we can start to make throughout the community, is that you start with that little, like drop in the water and it ripples out, that parents are more regulated parents raise regulated children, and then regulated children become regulated adults who then raise regulated children. So really hoping to be able to create that cycle of regulating, learning how to manage your emotions, and understanding the need for self-care. So this is a little bit about how you get the materials, but again, Tim has talked about that. We do have the Mental Health Center, along with TeamTech. We recorded 3 Remarkably Resilient Together videos. They're free, they're up on the website. So you can scan that QR code, or you can go to Remarkably Resilient Together there, the URL we listed, and just take a look at those videos. There's a kind of 15-minute overview. There's about a 20-minute going into more of the neuroscience, and then there's about a 15-minute on using the cards. So encourage you to take a look at those videos anytime that you might find them helpful, just as a reminder even. And then we've talked about, Tim and I and my sisters, what would it mean to roll out all of the R's of resilience? We've added one, reflection. So we're thinking that perhaps relationships, reflection, recovery, and response, that's a series that we want to begin to build out to help our community, again, be more resilient. And doing that through what the neuroscience of trauma has taught us, particularly regulation of relationships and how critical those are. We all know about our journeys of recovery, and then responses, coping mechanisms. I know Sharon and Karen and I have had to let go of some of those mechanisms that aren't serving us well anymore, that we developed as children. And that's really it. There's our contact information. I think we wanted to leave time for questions if you might have them. Anything we can answer with regard to resilience, the campaign, anything that we talked about today, be more than happy to do that. And again, I think you can do that through chat or feel free to come off mute. Catherine popped in a link to one of the videos, so thank you for that, Catherine. Super appreciate.
Yeah, and that link will actually take you to the playlist on YouTube where there's an intro video to the whole program, and then the 3 parts as well. So there's 4 videos on that link. We do have a couple questions that came through, if you're okay with me going ahead and sharing some of those.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the first one, if someone has a trauma history but doesn't feel ready to dive into processing that trauma, you know, if they've tried processing and it didn't go well, will this resource still be a tool that can be utilized?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say for every human, but for those of us that have had those trauma backgrounds, just being able to notice what's happening in your body and being aware of it without ever having to talk about what happened or relive any of that. It's just about recognizing what it's doing to your body and what it's doing to your thinking capacity, and deciding that you want to get back in control of it. So really the decision that Sharon and Karen and I, and honestly my son made, was we don't need to go through all that right now. What we need to do is we need to decide that we want to manage our emotions rather than they manage us. And so it was a personal decision that we each made and said, we know that that's healthier. We know that we don't need all that cortisol and adrenaline dumping into our bodies when we're not in real danger. And that it's also a higher probability that in those relational encounters that you really care about, when you come at those as a regulated individual, then having a win-win encounter, the probability is just magnificent. If you come into those encounters as a dysregulated human, and I can tell you from my own lived experience, you're probably going to have a lose-lose encounter. And I really think a lot about, do I care about the person across from me? And if I do, I need to be regulated, even if it means I have to step away and get regulated. So that's how I would talk about it. Tim, how would you talk about it?
I think you did a wonderful job from a clinical perspective, and my guess is there are going to be clinicians that would disagree with me. But I don't think that, sometimes I don't think we have to unpack our baggage until we're ready to unpack our baggage. And frankly, I don't think anybody's ready to unpack their baggage until they have learned to regulate their emotions. That's when they can make the decision at that point in time to share or to process whatever they need to process. What we're talking about is choosing to live your life a little bit differently and to understand your body. And so Kathleen mentioned something, cortisol. I mean, what that is that it's a stress hormone. And what we know is that stress hormone leads to all kinds of bad health outcomes, high blood pressure, diabetes, anxiety. The list just goes on and on and on and on. And so really what we're talking about is developing skills to be able to manage your emotion, reduce those cortisol levels, and choose to be in control. I think I said this from at the very start, is that there is a ton in our lives that we cannot control. But the one thing that we can control is how we choose to respond to each of those situations. And so really what these cards are, it's not about unpacking, it's not about processing, it's not about a therapeutic process. It's about developing skills that will help you manage your emotions in the best way possible. And by doing that, then you may choose at some point in time in your life to address those. And there's people, I've worked with people that have chosen never to, because they simply have been able to learn to manage and regulate their emotions in an effective way. And so there's no need for them to even go there. So, that was a long answer to say yes.
And then I'll go off script for a second and do like a two-part to that question. So if someone's maybe not ready to process it now, but you reference maybe, at a later date when they feel more ready to, could you share a little bit about open access and the crisis line for those who are, when they're ready to process, or if they need additional support, they know that resource?
Yeah, so I mean, at Johnson County Mental Health Center, we have an open access model. And so meaning that when and if you're ready, you can reach out to us. We may provide those services, but what we're going to do is evaluate what level of service you need and then get you connected with that level of care. It may be with us, it may be with a provider in the community, but we can serve as that bridge, and we can serve as that provider. But it's as simple as walking in any weekday, 9 to 4:30 is currently when we have open access open at our Olathe and our Shawnee offices. And then I think the other thing that's important, and this gets back to, I think Kelly mentioned this, and Kathleen said it takes a lot of courage, is that asking for help. So knowing that you need help and it being able to ask for help, and the easiest way to do that is to pick up the phone and call 988. 988 is the way that you can access a mental health professional here in Johnson County. We are a call center, and so all calls from Johnson County, Kansas come to us. It is a national call crisis line, but for us here in Johnson County, if you have a 913 area code, it's going to come to us. So we know the community, we know the resources, and we can help you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Another question that came through, pausing to reflect is hard for me. I like to stay busy mentally and physically so my mind doesn't race. What tips do you have for someone to get comfortable processing through these activities when I like to be busy?
Well, again, some people, it's going to be different for every person. And so one of the things that you'll see if you looked at the cards, there are going to be some cards that speak to you, because there are cards that actually talk about exercise and staying busy and creating structure within your day. The thing is that we're all individuals, and we will all approach this from a little bit different. And there's no wrong or right answer. If it is good for you to manage your health and your mental health and your mental well-being by staying active and busy, then that's what you should do. And that's the bottom line. So what you would see, we just showed 8 cards. You'll see a whole host of cards that would suggest other ways of structuring your time, staying busy, keeping a routine. All of those things are also very effective than other ways of being still and being mindful. You can be really, really busy, but still be mindful and intentional, as opposed to being mindful and scattered.
And when I ran into Joel, right, I was not a reflective human. I told you, kind of an action queen. And one of the ways that I learned to build my reflective capacity was in asking reflective questions of others. So it was in my interactions and deciding that, and I kind of learned, how to do that. But instead of how was your day, tell me one thing that you did at school today. What did you like about it? How did it challenge you? Well, I wonder tomorrow what that day might look like, or what are you looking forward to? I started using that open-ended questions in things that I was truly curious about, not just, I really didn't care. So you might even try that you almost flip it and use it in your interaction with others. That helped me get comfortable with building my reflective capacity. So then when I wanted to take a moment and pause and think about something, I had built that kind of questioning, curiosity, muscle is the way I would talk about it. So I just share that, but I echo with Tim. We're all so uniquely different. I wanted to learn how to be a more reflective human. That was important to me. And so, like I said, I started in my interactions with others and using a lot of questions and being curious.
I just saw another question that came up. It said, are you working with local schools so teachers can be trained in these concepts for their own mental health and their students? And the answer to that is yes. We have reached out. Kathleen and I actually have reached out to all the superintendents and asked them to identify somebody that we could begin to work with. But I will say, unfortunately, there are right now is an election year, and people make things political that really don't need to be political. And the issue of social emotional learning, or SEL, has become a political topic that many people don't want SEL in schools, or they don't see it as useful. And I would argue that it does us no good to help someone learn to read or write or understand algebraic equations when they can't manage their own emotions. And so social emotional learning is a must in schools. And so I think it's important that we teach that. It's also important that as adults, we model that for kids. But it's going to be harder and harder for us to be involved in schools within the current political climate. So it's also important that when we talk about this and when we look at local elections, that we understand who's speaking for us. And so it's important that we have access to kids, but we're losing more and more access. Right now, I'll just give you an example. There's a bill in the Kansas legislature right now that would not allow me, a teacher, if I was a teacher, to simply ask how a child's mental health was going in the day. If they had expressed something, a teacher would not be able to ask that. They would need to there's a whole process that this bill would require people to do. It's ludicrous, but there's this idea that if you talk about mental health, then some way it will impact negatively. And what I found in my work with young people, in particular with whether it be through NAMI, whether it be through Zero Reasons Why, young people want to share their experiences. They want to develop good coping strategies, but they need to learn that from trusted adults in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. It is in the silence, and it is in the darkness that allows these things to persist. It just makes me really angry as a survivor. Anyway, it's frustrating. Matthew, can you come to DS Bus Lines in Olathe, Kansas on a first Wednesday of the month to our safety meeting and talk to us? Well, absolutely. Just let us know where to be and when. Happy to do that. Tim and I do these presentations all over and are more than happy to do that for anyone that would like to hear more about regulation and self-care. So just reach out to Catherine or to Kelly. I can pop my email back in there in the chat. Just reach out to any one of us, and Tim also, but happy then to coordinate schedules. If you want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to work with Tim's executive assistant, and we'll get a time that works for everyone. So first Wednesday of the month. I just dropped the chat. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, feel free to keep the questions going in the chat. I am gonna combine this next one. I think they paired well together. So I'm gonna combine two into one, but pretty much so you've chosen to adopt and integrate Remarkably Resilient Together into your practices at Mental Health Center. Really, as you mentioned, both for employees and for the clients who can request it. Can you share your why and your how behind that, so that if there's others on the call who are interested in doing so at their organization, that they can do that?
Sure. So I mean, the first reason is, and I said this in the very beginning, I think that there is a number of things within our society that's a challenge. And I think that I'll be honest, just beyond the issues of mental health, you know, I get concerned about the direction that we all are going. You know, you see you see the amount of violence within our communities, the amount of hate in our communities. And we try to work within our community. The majority of the work that we do at the Community Mental Health Center is in the community. And so first and foremost, I want to make sure that staff are taking care of themselves, because if they've taken care of themselves and they're doing what they need to do to take care of themselves, then they're going to be better provider of services in the community. But then even further, you know, the whole point that Kathleen, and you know, when someone comes to you and says, I want to change the world, you can either take them seriously or you cannot. And when Kathleen told me that she wants to change the world, I see things very differently, because I think we can change them one person at a time. And then that sends a ripple through our community. And that ripple is really amazing. And so even just us talking with the 17 of you that are online today, you choose to find a way to be kind and regulate your emotions, then that will impact everybody within your sphere of influence, everybody in your life. And then if everybody that's in your life does that, then everybody else in their life does that. And what we create is a healthier community overall. And so, you know, most of the work that we do at the Mental Health Center is at a very micro level. We're helping individuals with mental health conditions live their best lives. The responsibility of the Mental Health Center is also then to help our community live its best life. That's my belief. There's probably not other directors that would agree with that. And so I believe that what we need to do is not only help individual clients, we have to help our community. And by doing that, my belief is that we actually then help individuals. And so that's my why. And you know, it starts with each person at our organization. As an employee, if I have employees who are appreciated and engaged, then they are going to provide services to people who are appreciative and engaged. And that kind of creates a tsunami of change. And I think that's how Kathleen McKune will change the world.
And you know, one of the other, Tim, we've talked a lot about one of the doors that you could come in is the well-being, you know, really understanding, and organizations are now, Gallup in their state of the workplace, both in 2022 and 2023, if you just look up Gallup's state of the workplace, their report, they talk about the importance of well-being and what that does in terms of productivity in the organization and engagement and satisfaction. So really those kinds of things that help your organization be more effective, directly tied into well-being. And that this piece of learning to emotionally regulate and self-care are two of the foundational pieces to well-being. And again, we've talked about the health benefits and the being able to engage in more productive relationships. So that well-being door may be a door that is one that your organization might also understand. It's what we found. It's kind of the door I went into when we talked to the Department for Children and Families. They really were looking for a well-being effort for their employees. And so they're piloting it now. Yes, yeah, Catherine put, as well as recruiting and retaining happy, healthy, and supportive employees. Yeah.
I'll stay on in case there's any more questions that come through, but I know we're coming up on time, so I like to kind of do a final wrap-up question for all of us, and I probably should have sent it to you in advance so that you could plan. I apologize. But if you had to pick one action step for those of us who are on the call tonight to do after the session ends, it could be immediately following, it could be down the road, but if there was one action step you wanted us to take, what would that action step be and why?
Mine would be to decide to be an individual that's going to be able to manage your emotions rather than they manage you, and know that that has health benefits and relational benefits also, which are connected to your physical and mental health. And pick one of the cards we had up there, do a little bit of research, find out those regulating techniques that work for you, and things that help you learn to get back into your thinking brain when your thinking brain's been hijacked by your emotional survival brain. That would be my action step. Tim, what would you want to?
My action step would be to choose to find a way to effectively manage your emotions. And again, I think it's a choice. Let me tell you, it's not an easy choice. You know, if anyone thinks that, and I won't speak for Kathleen, but you know, if anyone believes that I'm emotionally regulated in every situation, that's not how it works. I'm learning. And I think that's why I always throw in that piece about being kind. It's also about providing some grace, because we don't know what people are going through. We don't know what they're experiencing in their lives that may be at the time that they interact us. They may be not regulated, and that person may be me at some point in time. But I think to make a choice to say, I want to live in a different way. I choose to live in a way where I am going to decide how I'm going to respond to situations as opposed to emotionally react to them.
That's a great
And
question.
I think that by doing that, you change all kinds of things in your life.
Yes.
I love that. Wonderful. Well, I'll go ahead and stay on in case any other questions come through, especially if you have anyone that prefers to ask privately. I did want to go ahead and mention that if we have anyone attending tonight who would love to receive a certificate of attendance, that you can submit yourself to your licensing board or whomever to get potential CEUs or anything for tonight, please email us. We'll make sure we get that sent to you. But thank you so much to both Kathleen and Tim for presenting tonight, for sharing the wealth of information, your vulnerability to share as well. Super appreciate it. And as well, thank you all for attending and taking time out of your night to be here and to also be vulnerable through the session and engage and learn about this. So we hope you'll come back April 2nd. And if you have any questions at any point, let us know. But thank you to everyone and thank you to our presenters. And join me if you can in the chat, just saying thank you to Kathleen and Tim for all that they're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Oh, Linda, we can't hear you. Oh, I'm so...
Darn. Huh.
Linda is our amazing secretary of the board with NAMI Johnson County.
Well, I'm
And
pretty
she's
sure
a-
I realized what she said, so
She's a
thank
sweetheart.
you.
Uh,
See y'all later.
bye.
Bye-bye.
You.